14, there was some work done, a wall removed, installations. That's probably when the 5th bathroom was decommissioned to a 4-bedroom, because the field card did say 5. So now with the explanation from your attorney, it all sounds good to me. Thank you so much, and good luck.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Igo, any questions of our petitioner?
No questions, Mr. Chairman. Attorney Tardif has answered them all. Thank you.
Britta, any questions of our petitioner?
The exterior building material, what is it going to be? I see.
Well, yeah, I'm not sure if it's clabbered with, if it's the wooden product or the cement product, I'm not sure which, but it says the OSB Tech Shield sheathing.
Right, that's.
Yeah, I'm not sure what that material is.
Maybe composite material.
Yeah, probably. Sounds like it. That's what a lot of people are using
So
these
it's a
days.
permanent, like an aluminum siding kind of thing, or
No, this
that
is,
kind of look?
no, it's more like a, it looks like a natural clapboard, but there's two things. They either use it as a composite, more like a plastic, or it's called a cement board, which this may be too, but that's really what a lot of the builders are using these days. They're getting away from the wood.
Yeah, and from the
Much they
street, you
can.
can't tell
Yeah.
the difference.
Yeah, no, you really can't.
That's the only question.
Hardy board is something
Yeah.
you
Hardy
hear.
board is.
The type of it.
Yep, hardy board, that's correct. Yep.
And the rest of the original structure, what's on the outside of the original structure? Same thing?
Clapboard and wooden clapboard and cedar shake in the back. And so there'll be cedar shake in the back and the sides of this one.
Okay.
Anything else, Ms. Bruce?
No, that's it.
Oh,
Mr.
okay.
Chairman.
I have just a couple of questions, and this is more for people at home that might be interested in what we're talking about. There's going to be a new 2-story structure, is that correct?
That's correct.
And it's detached from the main home that's on the property
It
now,
is.
is that correct?
That's correct.
It will consist of a living floor on the first floor that will have a living room, half bath, and kitchen area.
Correct.
And on the second floor will be a full bath with a bath, shower, bedroom, and 2 closets.
Correct, and a washer dryer up there.
I'd like to know why my parents didn't build a structure like this for me when I was going to law school.
That's why you're going to law school.
Better pay them back, I'll tell you. With good grades. All right. There is something from the Board of Health, and that is that the Health Department file indicates an existing 1999 Title V septic system with a design capacity of 5 bedrooms total. The floor plans submitted with the septic design indicate an existing 5-bedroom dwelling. The property is located within the Zone 2 and is therefore restricted to a maximum number of 5 bedrooms based on the square footage of the lot and the grandfathered capacity of the existing septic system. An updated floor plan of the existing dwelling will be required to determine the existing number of bedrooms. An existing bedroom in the main structure will need to be decommissioned as a bedroom to accommodate the proposed family-related apartment if 5 bedrooms currently exist. A full review of the proposed project by the Health Department will be required prior to approval, and you're indicating to us there are only an existing 4 bedrooms there.
That's correct.
That structure just didn't look like a 5-bedroom home,
Yeah.
I'm sorry to say, but,
Yeah.
I mean, I wish it were for you, but then you wouldn't have to build this, but just didn't look like a 5-bedroom structure. Does anyone in our audience care to speak in favor of the petition? Seeing none. Does anyone care to speak in opposition to it? Seeing none. All those people that may be interested in giving us any information are now foreclosed from doing so. And we'll move it on to our board discussion, deliberations, and possible motion and vote. Anybody care to make anybody have anything they'd like to say about the petition before somebody perhaps offers a motion?
Well, what I would say is I think it's a very nice-looking building. I think it's going to fit right in with the neighborhood. I like the way that you've designed it so it wraps around that corner right there, and I'm very familiar with the area over there. I think it's in keeping with the neighborhood. And additionally, Mr. Chairman, I do think they meet the criteria under 407.2, subparagraphs 1 through 9. And so I would suggest that we approve this, and I would certainly recommend that to the board.
Okay, anybody else care to have any discussion before perhaps someone moves it to a motion? Anybody prepared to provide a motion to the
I'd
board?
like to make a motion that we approve the special permit as requested with no conditions.
I'll second.
Now, let this be a lesson in how government works. Real government, not what you see on Washington these days. But in any event, does the board care to have any discussion on the motion made by Mr. Igo, now seconded by Mr. Nicanello, to approve the permit, special permit, as requested without conditions? Hearing none, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, that carries unanimously. I'll look forward to a draft decision.
We'll have it soon.
Have a wonderful holiday season.
Thank you, and you as well.
Good
Thank you
luck.
to the board.
So you understand, the decision will be filed with the town clerk's office. 20 days must elapse before that is considered a final decision. At that point, the decision needs to be recorded at our Barnstable Registry of Deeds with proof of recordation returned back to the board. I don't expect anybody is going to appeal from this. It's a very nice structure, I'm sure a good addition to the neighborhood. Good luck.
All right, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And that brings us to the next group of petitions, that of Selco. If anybody at home is interested in why we're not mincing words this evening, it's because one of our board members does need to move along to another very important meeting. And so we're going to take these three petitions, numbers 4781, 4782, 4783, which differ only as to their locations and perhaps the structure that's to be affixed. Is that fair to say?
That is correct.
And you'll tell us the differences in each one, but otherwise they remain the same.
Yes.
All right, so 4781 deals with utility pole 286 in ROW, nearest parcel to utility pole for reference only, along Route 6A in Yarmouth Port. The property location is in an R40 zoning district. This evening, the applicant is seeking a special permit under zoning bylaw 408, use table 202.5, subparagraph F7, to attach a CRAN wireless equipment to an existing utility pole in a public right-of-way. The next petition, 4782, deals with utility pole 1S, I'm assuming for south, and ROW for everybody is right of way. Nearest parcel to utility pole for reference only, 511 Route 28 in West Yarmouth, Massachusetts. Again, property in a zoning district here in town, but a different one, B3 and HMOD1. Our applicant seeks a special permit under bylaw 408 and use table 202.5, subparagraph F7, to attach a CRAN, C-R-A-N, wireless equipment to a new utility pole, replacing the existing pole, which is in the public right-of-way. Petition number 4783 is, again, the same petition, a Selco partnership. They're doing business as Verizon Wireless, who is, as always, represented by the wonderful law firm of McLean Middleton from Manchester, New Hampshire, with the utility pole Roman numeral 2/G and right-of-way of 100 Captain Chase Road, South Yarmouth, Massachusetts. That property is in our 40 zoning district, and again, this evening, pursuant to the same paragraphs of our bylaws, the applicant is seeking to produce a CRAN wireless equipment, or fix it rather, to a new utility pole, replacing the existing pole in the public right-of-way. Good evening, sir. Would you identify yourself for the people at home, please?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. My name is Peter Anderson from McLean Middleton in Manchester, New Hampshire. I'd like to start by talking about facts that are common to each site that we're requesting approval of. There is
Please.
no ground equipment, lighting, or noise generated at any of these sites. The equipment consists of a 12 by 38.7-inch cylinder top-mounted on each pole, remote radio heads, and an electrical junction box also attached to each pole. The equipment is depicted on the plans for each site. Now, with respect to the first petition, 4781, that's Old Kings Highway and Eileen Street. The top of the cylinder will be 31 feet 8 inches. The top of the pole now is 27 feet 6 inches. We have applied for and obtained an exemption from the Old Kings Highway Historic District Committee, which is at tab 8 of your materials. Regarding petition 4782 on Route 28, the utility pole is proposed to be replaced. The existing pole is 18 feet 6 inches, and the new pole is proposed to be 29 feet 6 inches. The top of the cylinder will be 33 feet 8 inches above ground level, and it thus qualifies for the height exemption under section 408.7.6.5 of the bylaw, since there will not be more than a 20-foot increase in height. Regarding the final petition at Captain Chase Road, the utility pole is proposed to be replaced at that site as well. The existing pole is 28 feet above ground level, and the new pole will be 38 feet 6 inches above ground level. The top of the cylinder will be 42 feet 8 inches above ground level, and it thus qualifies for the exemption that I just referenced under the bylaw, since it will not be an increase of more than 20 feet. And I have here today from C Squared Systems, Dan Brown, who's the RF engineer, radio frequency engineer, to explain the need for these new sites in Yarmouth and the fact that the emissions from these sites are well below federal standards.
I don't think we could have asked for a more succinct presentation from you, Council. Thank you, and it's always good to hear from you, sir. How are you this evening?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Go right ahead and tell us all about it, please.
All right. So I have with me the plots from the RF affidavit. They should be similar to what you guys have seen in the past. The shaded green and yellow areas show where Verizon currently provides acceptable and reliable LTE service. Green represents their 700 megahertz layer. It's their main layer of the network. It tends to propagate the furthest. The yellow area represents their AWS, or 2100 megahertz LTE network. The footprint, due to the physics behind the frequencies, the higher frequencies generally don't propagate as far as the lower frequencies. That's why you pretty much see more green areas than yellow. The black symbols show the locations of Verizon's existing macro sites in the area.
Just ask you one question, just informational.
Sure.
Are you saying the yellow areas are where the reception is good and the green areas aren't? Would that be fair to say?
So yellow is where the reception is sufficient at both of Verizon's LTE networks, at both the 700 megahertz and 2100 megahertz layer.
Mm-hmm.
Where you see green, it's sufficient at one level of the network, but not necessarily both.
And how about the white?
So white is where the signal strength is less than neg 95 dBm,
Okay.
which is what Verizon is designing their network to in this area. Does not mean that there is no signal, just that it's lower than the threshold required for reliable service.
Okay, thank you.
No problem. You're welcome. So the three proposed facilities, I'll start with the Route 6A on Kings Highway to the north. Small Cell 30 is what Verizon's calling it. That facility is located near the intersection of Route 6A and Setauket Road. That facility is needed to provide reliable service at both of Verizon's frequencies, as well as provide additional network capacity to the area. It has sufficient line of sight to cover up and down the main roadway, and as well along Setauket Road and the residential area surrounding. The Captain Chase facility, Small Cell 12, that is located in the center of, a fairly large residential neighborhood. It's flat. It's centrally located and will have the ability to provide reliable LTE service, specifically at the 2100 megahertz frequencies. The Yarmouth 5 facility you see is a macro site in pink. That's actually not an existing facility. It's one that Verizon's currently working with the town for. It's on a water tank. They're currently undergoing leasing discussions. So that facility has the ability to provide some coverage into this residential neighborhood, but not necessarily provide reliable service at their higher frequencies. The small cell will essentially backfill. And then to the south along Route 28, Verizon's Small Cell 11 facility, that's proposed just off of Route 28, immediately across from the Cape Cod Inflatable Park. It's needed to, again, provide reliable service at the 2100 megahertz frequencies, as well as provide the necessary capacity to the area needed, especially during the seasonal months. In addition to the coverage plots, we also submitted RF exposure studies for each of the small cells individually. In conclusion, the analysis shows that the levels will be well below the FCC's requirements for general exposure. In addition to analyzing it at ground level, we also analyze it at 16 feet, which represents a person standing on a second floor of a building.
Okay.
Similarly, it's well below the required levels.
Now, do these give off any noise at all? None? No noise, okay.
No lighting, no noise,
No lighting, no noise, okay.
No independent generation of power?
no ground equipment.
So this is, I imagine, this is the new way that everybody's going on top of the telephone poles. I know we've had AT&T here in the past, and that's what they were proposing as well.
It's not a total replacement for macro sites. Macro sites I define as towers on top of water tanks, church steeples, flagpoles. It's not a total replacement, but
Get you into those areas
It
where you
gets to the
need better
areas-
service, is that what it is?
it backfills, and it works with the macro sites to provide better coverage.
And is that because all of these smartphones and everything that are they taking all of the reception? Do they draw it in? I mean, if everybody's on a smartphone and computers, does that tax the system?
Yeah, they are largely capacity-based, so they're essentially small cell sites. The intent is to provide either coverage improvement or additional network capacity for a small isolated or targeted area. Typically a busy intersection, a stretch of a roadway in front of a retail plaza or in sort of a hotspot. Such as
You got to do it into the mic. I'm sorry. I should have been policing you better. Please.
such as the high school on Station Avenue, which we
Okay.
have previously permitted a facility. But to answer your question, correct, they're meant to complement the existing macro networks, not necessarily to replace.
Okay, thanks.
Susan, any questions of the
Just
petition?
to, when you talk about the difference in heights, where are you measuring? Is it from the base of the pole? You said there's, some of them are going from 18 feet to 20. Where are you measuring that distance from the
It's
top of
above
the
ground level.
ground level? Okay. And as technology develops, are these being installed in such a way that you can easily go in and upgrade the technology without having to come back through a cumbersome sort of a...
I don't know the answer to that question. Do you?
Yes, they are being designed such that an upgrade should essentially just be either swapping out the RRH, the remote radio that's mounted on the side of the pole, or replacing the antenna with a model that may support new frequencies as newer technologies come along.
Okay, so the basis for which we approve these does not change. It would just be a regular, like, someone changing their shoelaces or something. It's not, doesn't require you to come back to the board at all for...
Right, that's my understanding. If you look at the remote radio heads and the electrical junction box on the side of each pole, those are the pieces of equipment together with possibly the antenna that would be switched out and wouldn't require coming back for a special permit.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, that'd be good for the board, for the Verizon as well.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
They
just
wouldn't have to pay me.
Well, nor would they have to take up our busy schedule. Mr. Igo, did you have any questions
I'm
beyond
all-
what you've already asked? I have a couple, if I could, please. Enlighten me, just because, we throw these things around like we're supposed to, like we're experts, and we know what the difference between 1900 megahertz and 2100 megahertz are. What is the significance of that increase, if you would, into the microphone?
Sure. So as far as FCC license go, there's very limited spectrum, and they're very costly. So Verizon holds licenses across 4 different frequency bands. 700 megahertz, 800 megahertz, and then up, that's what's known as their low band spectrum. That's their base layer of the network that they generally travel further. And then a little bit further up in the spectrum, they have licenses up in the 1900 and 2100 megahertz. As far as the technology, it's very similar. It's just the physics behind it. The signal will become higher frequency. Will actually, it'll be heavily attenuated by things like trees and clutter and.
The idea being to
that-
give everybody better and clearer reception and sustainability when they're on the internet.
Which one has the better line of sight?
They both operate ideal under a line of sight condition. The lower frequencies will propagate through the trees, the leaves, the homes a little bit better than the higher frequencies. And I guess to answer your question, the benefit of providing the residents of Yarmouth with reliable service at all their frequencies is bandwidth, spectrum, speed, and just overall reliability. It's like additional lanes on the highway when you have a lot of traffic.
So now these are on poles that are powered by the juice running through the wires above, right? When we lose electricity, what does that do to our reception, our ability to communicate via cell?
Yep, so the small cells, because they don't have ground equipment and it's not feasible to install a generator at each and every pole,
Sure.
they do not have backup power, so they will go out during an extended power outage, in which case the users will fall back onto the macro networks, which do have backup
The
power.
700, 800?
Yep, so all the macro facilities, Verizon generally will install a generator at all those sites. So in the event that the power goes out and the small cells are inactive, the users should still be able to connect to the macro sites for the most part.
Well, following up on the same line that Susan gave, was asking you, please, or Ms. Britter, excuse me, Susan, was asking you, why wouldn't it make sense to have a sustainable battery pack in these units as a fallback so that they would be powered up? I mean, they can't draw that much juice, do they?
That's a good question. I think, I guess the best way to answer that is that the macro sites do, in addition to the generator, have a battery backup, which helps cover the lapse in time between when the power goes out and the generator kicks back on. And the batteries just don't last for a long time. It would just
Okay.
be short little glitches.
I guess that makes sense. Okay.
Maintenance problem.
Mr. Nicanello, did you have questions about the petition?
I just had one, thank you, Mr. Chairman. There was a letter from the Board of Health pertaining to one on Route 6A. Is that only for that pole that needs to be under review in 24 months, or is that for all the poles?
I believe that's a condition for all the special permits that have been put in this year, or even, I think we had one last year and
Okay.
all of them this year.
So that one letter would be pertain to all three?
Right, and I
Okay.
actually brought a decision document with the conditions.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll read the Board
Yeah.
of Health in at the end of
I
any
just didn't know if it was that one pole or all poles.
panelist questions. Mr. Barron, do you have any questions of the petitioners?
Yeah, the second and third petition talk about replacing the poles. Who's responsible for replacing those poles? Is it Verizon or is it someone else?
Eversource,
It's the Eversource? When are those going to be scheduled?
they're already completed.
They have been.
Right.
So your pictures aren't accurate.
Well, the pictures, I thought that too, because I looked at the difference between the height of the replacement pole on the top, but I was corrected, I was upgraded by Mr. Colarusso. There's a certain percentage of the pole that's underground,
Right,
so they are accurate.
right.
Okay, all right. I have no further questions.
So, referencing what Mr. Nicanello did, it's the letter of Carl Lawson, who has had many of his letters read into the records of these proceedings at this board. Based on a review of the special permit application for the above petitions and phone discussion with Mr. Peter Anderson and McLean Middleton, the Health Department understands the following regarding this proposal. No auxiliary power sources such as generators are included. You verified that. Therefore, no auxiliary fuel sources such as diesel or propane are included. No short-term bridging power components. My question, there's the answer. Such as batteries or capacitors are proposed. No bridging component hazardous materials such as electrolyte solutions are included. No toxic or hazardous materials of any kind are included. The RF report includes projections that are all below the maximum permissible exposure limits set by the FCC. An actual RF study with field measurements will be conducted after these three installations are completed. That's per the norm. We always see that. Per Town Bylaw 408, communication antennas, buildings, and towers, Section 408.11, an inspection report for the locations must be submitted to the building commissioner at least once every 24 months. And the town may retain a technical expert in the field of RF engineering at the expense of the carrier to verify the inspection report. Just out of curiosity, we've seen that, and it's been the condition of each and every decision regarding these. Has that ever occurred?
They're not online yet.
No, I'm talking about, well, we've had other installations, though, where the same provision
Right.
applies.
For macro sites, I don't know the answer to that. You-
That the town's gone out and obtained,
Normally,
retained its
with
own
normally-
RF inspector?
Normally, when towns do that, it's at the stage of permitting to test the credibility of our RF engineer. That's typically when they do that. Afterwards, I've not heard of it.
Well, I haven't been losing any hair since you guys have been putting these up, so I guess you're okay. The zoning board of appeals may want to condition the special permit to include an RF field study be submitted with the inspection report to the building commissioner for the review by the above-mentioned retained technical expert in RF engineering. Well, you're going to be producing an RF field, you're going to be producing an after-the-fact of installation report, correct?
Right, that's what's required by the conditions of the permit.
Yeah.
And is it at that time that the town's engineer would be out there affirming what your engineer is saying is going to take place?
If the town wants that, but the conditions as they state now, applicant must submit emissions report of compliance with maximum permissible radiation per site to be filed with the ZBA and the Board of Health.
So, condition number 7 by Mr. Lawson's letter would seem to be the exact same thing he's referencing in the last paragraph. That is, that you're going to conduct an actual RF study with field measurements for each of the completed sites, and then submit those reports to the town. Yes?
Yes.
And then at the town's election, they may challenge those by obtaining their own, or verify them.
Right.
So you understand that these 7 sub-paragraphs to Mr. Lawson's letter would all need to be stated conditions in any approval of these special permits,
Yes.
as you consider the drafting of these documents.
And of course, you have that paragraph underneath for the bylaw that you have to submit the reports once every 2 years. That's also part of it.
Bylaw section 40811.
Yes, yes.
Yeah, that's got to, and again, we've seen that stated in each and every one.
Right.
So we'll look forward to that in these as well. Let's take them one at a time. Oh, excuse me. So the people at home may be aware, the reason I overlooked, did anyone want to speak in favor or against the petitions, because we're the only people in the room. So since there is no public, we don't have to invite them to speak. We do have 3 petitions. Unless the board has any other questions, let's take them individually if we could, please, and start with 4781. Is anybody prepared to make a motion on 4781?
I'll make a motion that we approve the special permit as requested with the conditions. I will adopt the conditions of the Board of Health, paragraphs 1 through 7 of the letter undated from Carl E. Lawton, but read into the record on this date. And also noting the 408 section of the bylaw, 408
11.
11, regarding inspections once every 24 months. Those would be the only conditions, Mr. Chairman.
There's a second to that by Mr. Nicanello. On that motion so made and seconded, does the board care to have any discussion before moving along to a vote? Hearing none and understanding this vote is that the motion be granted with the stated conditions. Let me just make a note if I could. All those in favor of that motion made and seconded, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed? That carries unanimously. Now, so as not to be repetitive, the same conditions, inclusive of 40811, will need to be considered in each of the next 2. All right? That a good way of proceeding?
So on the next petition, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the special permit as requested with the same conditions of the last petition, the same conditions as petition number 4781. We don't have to reference that particular petition, but so we understand what those are.
Okay,
Second?
and that was Mr. Barron?
Yes.
Didn't even have to ask for a second. Does the board care to have any discussion before moving along to a vote? Hearing none, all those in favor of that motion made and seconded with the stated conditions, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, that carries unanimously. And that brings us to our third.
Petition 4783, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the special permit as requested with the conditions set forth in the previous two petitions. Those being the 1 through 7 from Mr. Lawson's letter and 408, Section 11 of the bylaw.
And is there a second?
Second?
Again, Mr. Barron? On that motion made, seconded, and with the same stated conditions, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, that carries unanimously. Merry Christmas to Verizon.
To you all as well.
Perhaps they'll send me a Christmas present, meaning I don't get a bill this month, but I doubt that. Well, thank you very much, gentlemen. Please, safe trip home, happiest of holidays. I'll look forward to receiving the draft decisions. We have one other matter, if we could, before adjourning, and that is the town of Yarmouth has sought a continuance of its pending matter, which is, for those at home, that would be petition number 4779. They are all wrapped up in other matters, working hard for the town this evening. And so I took the liberty of suggesting to Sandy that we could probably consider this without a representative of the town not appearing. That's not to suggest they had any arrogance in that, but rather I suggested that they deal with other town business that they had that was pressing. So my understanding is that they will come down tomorrow and execute an extension agreement. Oh, they have executed it. Okay, so if we do consider a continuance, the continuance would be subject to them coming down, the representative coming down and signing the continuance agreement, okay? And what they're asking for is that it be continued from this evening, and they really don't suggest another night. Is there a good time, Sandy?
February 28th.
February 28th. Does anybody have any concerns over that? No. Anybody prepared to make a motion
So
on the
moved.
town's request to continue? 28 of 2019, remember your calendars, ladies and gentlemen. We have a motion made by Mr. Igo to grant that request for continuance, seconded by Mr. Nicanello. Does the board care to have any discussion before proceeding along to a vote? Hearing none, all those in favor of that motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, that request for continuance carries unanimously. And subject to, of course, the town representative coming down and executing the appropriate extensions. And with that, we move to adjourn, do we?
So moved.
So moved, and to everybody at home that's still listening, please have an enjoyable and safe holiday season.